Hello again, everyone. Chromatic Photo 4 here. Today we're going to discuss Nebula by Soundspot, a multi-effect plugin with a lot of things packed into one package, as is Soundspot's norm. All the modules are enabled by default when you first load it up, so we'll turn them all off for now, and then we'll go over them one by one, starting with the delay. Turn it on, we immediately see a kind of nice looking screen displaying what the delay is doing. I'm going to demo this just using a basic instance of 3xOSC in SAW form. So this is what it'll sound like with just the default delay settings. It's a delay, it works. If you want to edit the delay, then you of course have your length bars down here. So eighth bar, quarter bar, if you want to make the left and right delays different, then you can click this little chain icon to disable the linking between the two. Neat little sound design opportunities with that. Chain them back together for now. You can also change whether it's a straight note, a triplet note, or a dotted note. Gives you more to work with in that sense. There's a feedback section, which determines how much volume there is to your particular delay, and how quickly it fades out. Kind of like with their Oracle algoverb, if you put the feedback all the way to max, your delay basically never shuts off, so you can get some neat little ambient sound design effects with that. Mix knob, that determines how much wet to dry signal there is. 0%, nothing but dry. 100%, nothing but wet. So there's also a filter section strictly for the delay, which is kind of nice. You can has a little spectrogram here, so you can see what frequencies the sound is producing and cut them accordingly. You can change how steep the slope of the cut is using the low oct and high oct knobs. Let's go ahead and move on to the chorus. Turn that on. By default, this is what it'll sound like. Ugh. So let's change that up a little. Let's turn the rate down. Increase the depth. Add a little feedback. More mix. And we can change whether this is a stereo sound with stereo information or turn it into a mono sound. This is particularly useful if you're using this on a bass plugin, because you can then control all the neat little chorus effect, mash it into mono space to prevent phasing issues. So pretty basic, it does the job. The gray wave you see is the dry signal, and the yellow wave is the wet signal. Basically, the chorus itself and kind of how it's moving in comparison to the original dry signal. I will say that it's kind of confusing. I don't understand very well how this wave really applies to this particular sound, because if I were to put a spectrogram on this, it wouldn't even remotely look like this. But that's a nitpick on my part. Let's move over to the flanger. Works basically the same way, except that instead of a chorus effect, it is a flanging effect. Very simple. Turn off the chorus so you can hear it better. Similar to the chorus, there's a rate, depth, feedback, and mix knob, and the same mono and stereo controls. Simple and useful. You can then layer that with the chorus. Start to get some fairly pretty sounds happening. A little more, maybe add a little more feedback on the delay. Slow it down a touch. Change 1 to an 1/8 bar. There's also a general filter section, which filters the entire plugin, also with a spectrogram. Now, interestingly, for the filter, you can switch it from stereo to mid to side. So this is actually very interesting in that if I set the chorus and flanger respectively to stereo, suddenly this mid section is only filtering just the mids and not the stereo information produced by those two modulators. Same if I switch it to side mode. So suddenly this turns into a bit more of a mixing tool, which is really fancy. Or you can do stereo to just do the whole thing. Now, all these effects are pretty good by themselves. They're at least okay, I would say. Not amazing, not horrible. But where the real fun begins is when you turn on the LFO. The LFO can be set to target the amplitude, aka the volume of the sound, delay, chorus, flanger mixes, or the low or high cut. So with these things right here, suddenly you get a really interesting sound design tool. So for instance, for me, one of my favorite things is to go to the high cut, which is basically a low pass filter. If I just play the note now, voila, we suddenly have a bit more of a clicky ARP sound. If I speed it up, so the LFO is actually surprisingly handy, as you can see, just for changing the sound entirely. When layered with all these other effects, the chorus, the flanger, and the delay, suddenly you got a lot of power in one little package. I can adjust the range of the LFO, which is kind of how harshly it's applied to the desired frequency. So for instance, if I put it down to 50, now, bear in mind, see if I go to the LFO, suddenly I can see what it's doing to the filter. Bear in mind that your settings here do determine what the filter does when you put the LFO on it. So if I make the cut a little more surgical and then raise the frequency slightly, so neat stuff can happen with that. You can change the direction that the LFO is traveling. And you can change the shape of the LFO to a triangle, sine, or square. Suddenly you could almost use that as a sort of side chain. So that's basically all the main features of the plugin. As far as my personal opinion of it, I'm not that big of a fan. Which means I'm going to be making a counter review where I'm going to actually use it. Like, I like how all the effects play together. Like, my main complaint before with Soundspot is, like, by themselves, the individual plugins just don't sound that crazy good. The individual modulator sections, there are other plugins that do all this stuff better. Where, again, the plugin shines is in mixing all this stuff together. The fact that you can use an LFO on any one of these parameters. Even I could put it on the chorus mixer, the Flanger. How I could set the filter to control stereo, mid, side. That's not something that you see very often in a lot of plugins. Even most filter plugins I've seen don't do this. So that's one thing that's kind of nice on that part. I feel like there are a lot of things that are kind of limited in this. For one, there's no way to adjust the signal chain as far as I understand. Like, I can't set it so that the delay comes after the chorus and flanger. As far as I understand, it's only going to be, like, the chorus and flanger are applied directly to the delay, and I can't move any of these around to change that. For me, that's a problem and an irritant. What if I wanted to filter only the flanged signal? I could actually just put the filter right before that and then leave dry signal unaffected or something like that. I think that would be a neat feature if you could move these modules around to change the signal chain, like the sequence of the effects. That it's kind of static, that you can't change it. It's a little bit of an irritant to me. The LFO tool is nice, but while, like, to me, being only able to modulate like 6 parameters is really not that good. Like, I know other plugins where you can literally modulate everything in them, like Pigments or Serum, where you could put an LFO on pretty much anything, even on like this little chain signal. You could, and so like having only 6 LFO targets is a little limited in my book. And additionally, the fact that there are only 4 selectable LFO shapes, 8, I guess, if you count the little reversing function, that's also very limited. Like, I don't understand why they chose only 4 LFOs when, like, I have a number of other Soundspot plugins where you can actually draw the LFO by itself. So I don't know why they didn't allow for that functionality in here. I feel like if you were able to edit the LFO yourself, that would make this a much more powerful plugin. So, I mean, there are things that the plugin does well. I think that it does make for some really beautiful ambience, and it's especially fun taking all this stuff and using it on like a bass synth. For instance, if I just take the 3X OSC right now, pitch it down a bit. Too much. Turn off the delay. Set my chorus and flanger to mono. And now that's interesting. Okay, so let me set it back to stereo. So, I mean, there's stuff that it's useful for. It's not a bad plugin. It's not a garbage plugin. But I just don't think that some of the ideas behind it were crazy well thought out. I feel like they could all be mixed together better. I feel like if Soundspot were to update this plugin with some of these features, an editable LFO, the ability to modulate more stuff, more modules. So instead of just a delay, you have like a panning module or a mid-side module specifically. Like things like that. If there were more functions, more features, I feel like this could actually be a top-notch plugin. As is, it's kind of a lower middle plugin. Not horrible, but not by any means amazing. So that means I'm going to be making another video where I'm going to use it to prove myself wrong. So I will be producing that video within the next week or so. Until then, thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see y'all next week.